Okay, well, I will go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining me this afternoon for this informational webinar about the City of Dubuque's Arts and Culture Special Projects Grant Program. So a couple notes before I get started. In the handouts of your control panel for the GoToWebinar, in that handout section, I have added the guidelines and the question PDFs that are already available on our website, but I put them there for easy access for you today. And then as we go throughout the webinar today, you can either put questions into, there is a question area of the control panel. You can add questions there, and there's also a chat. You can feel free to add questions there. I'll be keeping an eye on both areas as we go throughout the webinar today. And I will, I'll save any of the questions to the end, but as they might pop into your head, feel free to jot them down and we can address them at the end of the webinar. So again, thanks for being here today. I'm Jenny Peterson Brandt, the Arts and Cultural Affairs Coordinator with the City of Dubuque, and excited to share with you more information about this funding program. So the agenda for today's webinar is we will go over some important dates that you'll want to have on your calendars in terms of deadlines for submitting and the process that we go through on our end, so you kind of understand the timeline for the work that happens behind the scenes and when you can expect notifications and things like that. We'll cover the eligibility requirements for the Special Projects Program. We'll talk about the funding guidelines, the rating criteria, the application steps, which is probably what we'll spend the largest chunk, one of the largest chunks of today on, because this will be new for this year. We have transitioned our online application process from the Form Center that many of you have used in the past to apply for City of Dubuque Arts and Culture grants. We have transitioned to Slide Room. So for those of you who have applied to the Iowa Arts Council, the new system will look very familiar to that because they also use, the Iowa Arts Council also uses Slide Room. We'll talk about the review process. Again, that's just a timeline piece that we'll go over, a few helpful tips, and then have time for question and answer at the end. So the purpose of the Special Projects Grant Program is to provide funding that is meant to cultivate unique and innovative creative arts and cultural experiences for the public that prioritize community engagement and active partnership in which all parties may experience change and growth. Special projects must incorporate or integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion practices into the development and execution of the project, and there must be evidence provided that the project advances city goals and priorities. So today's webinar is being recorded. As we go through this today, you will notice some areas like this where there are links in here that you'll be able to access from the slides and from the recording that's provided. That'll be available on our website after this. So there are those links right in there so that you can get directly over to the City of Dubuque's Arts and Culture Master Plan and other hot links easily. In terms of those important dates, the first one to note is the deadline for submitting an application for the Special Projects Program. Applications are due by Friday, May 13th. The application portal does close at 11:59 p.m. So you'll want to have everything ready to go and ready to hit submit in advance of that time. Throughout the month of May then and into early June, we will be working with our volunteer reviewers who will read and score all of the applications based on the rubric that is provided to them. In June, we will forward a funding recommendation to the we will go to the commission with those reviews and with those scores, and they will draft a funding recommendation that goes on to the city manager and to the city council for approval. Once that funding is approved, then we go through the process of sending out award notifications and drafting and releasing contracts to grant recipients. In August, then there will be a time where we're working together. I'm sending you contracts, you're sending me back a signed version of that. We then get that signed by the city manager and for full execution. And then I will also be asking you in August to send me an invoice for payment of your grant award. One thing of special note with the special projects grants is that we pay out 80% of the grant award up front, and then we pay the remaining 20% upon the submission of your final report, which is the last bullet on our timeline here. Also in August, once we get those invoices, then we disperse those funds through the finance department. So back to that final report. A final report is due no later than August 31st of 2023. So the funding period for the special projects program is that July 1, 2022, June 30th to 2023. A special project can occur and the expenses related to it during that period of time. And so 60 days after the end of that period is the latest date to get a final report into us. You can submit final reports earlier, anytime when your project is complete and you have done that evaluation and you're able to complete the final report. You can get it in as soon as you would like. You don't have to wait until that August 31st date to submit it. That's just the deadline to get it in. So in terms of eligibility for the special projects program, organizations that are, you have to be a Dubuque-based organization. This program's different from the operating support. I guess I should say that up front, that you can be one of these three types of entities to apply for special projects funding. So you can be a Dubuque-based, meaning the city of Dubuque, organization that operates as a nonprofit tax-exempt 501c3. You could also be a Dubuque-based group that has your own specific mission, a governing structure, budget, but you operate under the incorporated status of another nonprofit in the community. One really good example of this is the affiliates that operate under the Dubuque County Fine Arts Association. Dubuque County Fine Arts Society. They have affiliate groups under them that can apply for special projects for their individual group work. Or we also allow for Dubuque-based groups that operate in service to the broader community, but they might not have had a chance to consider becoming a nonprofit or to have that designation awarded to them yet. So in all three of those cases, we ask for, if you are a tax exempt organization, we ask you to upload your federal designation letter as part of your application. If you're operating under a fiscal agent, we ask for a letter from your fiscal agent that acknowledges that, yes, you do as a group operate under their fiscal sponsorship. And if you're that third category, that slightly looser one, we ask you to provide us with a letter that talks about the history of your group and tells us about the work that you have done and how you operate in service to the community to demonstrate that. So the entities that are not eligible for this program include for-profit organizations or businesses, individual artists, any organization or group that is based outside of the Dubuque city limits, or an organization that has an outstanding final report from a previous grant award of FY21 or prior to that with the city of Dubuque, with the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs. For eligible projects and expenses that can ask for funding under the special projects program, One thing to note with this is that the project itself and the activities around it must be conducted within the Dubuque city limits, since this is a tax-funded program. Dubuque taxpayers, their dollars go towards this. But the one thing that is different from prior years with special projects, or maybe we just made it more explicit in the instructions last year, we made this change to make sure it was spelled out, that your expenses can be paid to vendors that are based outside of the city of Dubuque. So, and I think in past years there was some confusion that you had to hire. So if you were hiring an artist for a performance, that they had to be a Dubuque artist that you were hiring for a performance. That is not the case. It's just the activities or the project themselves have to take place in the city of Dubuque. So in terms of eligible projects, you could be, this would include the creation, the performance, the exhibition, publication, or presentation of arts and culture experiences that might be related to any of these categories that you see here. And eligible expenses that can be part of your budget that can be funded through the grant can include anything from artist or contractor fees, licensing or subscription fees, supplies and materials, space and equipment rental, domestic travel, marketing and publicity that you might be wanting to fund as part of a project or program. We do allow for equipment purchases where the equipment costs less than $500, or at least you can't ask for the grant to cover more than $500 of an equipment purchase, and employee or volunteer costs that are essential to meeting the project outcomes can also be part of your grant request for special projects. Items that are ineligible expenses to be funded by grant funds is projects or expenses that occur prior to or after the funding period of that July 1, 2022 to June 30th of 2023. Ongoing projects or programs with arbitrary beginning and end dates. Projects or activities that are not open to the public, general operating expenses, religious, political, and sports activities, fundraising or benefit events, competitions, contests, or awards to honor or recognize achievement, food, beverage, or catering costs. Those cannot be covered by the grant request, but they, in some cases, might be part of a project that you're putting forward. They would just have to be covered by match funds and not be funded by the grant. International travel, capital projects, major equipment purchases, regranting, lobbying activities, or the acquisition of or purchase of artwork for permanent collections, including most public art installations. So as we start to get into talking about what also needs to be part of a successful special projects grant proposal, it's imperative that a special project is unique and relevant. That meaning that the project should create unique and innovative arts and cultural experiences or arts and cultural learning opportunities that stand out from the applicant's previous offerings in a significant way. One thing that for those of you that may have applied for special projects in the past, you can have the activity that you're applying for special projects funding for can be part or can be an element within an established series of programming that you might already be doing, but the activity that you're asking for the funding for has to be unique and different and stand out in some way from that established series of programming from what you've done in the past with that series. The special projects have to include partnerships, meaning, or I should say partnership, It could just be one partner, but that means that there has to be active and collaborative partnership with one or more entities, supported by the submission of at least one letter of commitment that demonstrates active engagement in the project development or implementation. And special projects also have to incorporate DEI into the project. In the planning efforts, and the stated outcomes must integrate DEI practices that engage and or represent diverse populations, advance equity, and create inclusive access to project activities. In terms of the amount of funding that's available with the Special Projects Program, you can ask for a maximum of $8,000. The minimum request is of $1,000. In the program total funding that we have available to use this, to award out this year, we have $35,000 in the program. And we do require a one-to-one match for the special projects. So the one-to-one match can be a combination of in-kind and cash resources, with at least 25% of that match being a cash match. So if you, for instance, if you have a project that the total cost of the project or program is $2,000, you would be asking for $1,000 of that to be covered by the grant. The other $1,000 would be covered by matching funds, and at least $250 of that match would have to be in cash resources. So as we jump into the rating criteria of what the applications are actually scored on, there are 5 different categories with a value of 3 points each for each of these areas, starting with the project description, goals, uniqueness, and relevance. The next area that we're looking at, and there are questions directly aligned with these criteria areas in the application. The second one that we're looking at is that partnership piece. The third area is DEI integration in the project. The fourth area is the project readiness, and then finally looking at how the project aligns with or actively advances the city's arts and culture master plan goals and priorities. So we'll walk through the parts of the application, the questions which relate directly to that rating criteria. The first rating criteria area of the project's goals and objectives highlight what makes the project unique, innovative, and timely regarding potential community impact, and how those goals and objectives address how the project fits within the applicant's mission. So that's the question that we're asking in the actual application form is up here at the top. And there are sort of 3 prompts as part of the question to help you flesh out, give you thoughts on what to flesh out in that narrative. The second area that we'll be looking at is that partnership piece. So there's a narrative section that you complete talking about the partners, identifying who they are, describing the roles and responsibilities of all the partners that are involved in the proposed project activities. And there's also an upload area as part of this question where you can upload a letter of commitment from at least one collaborating partner. Again, you don't have to have more than one partner, but you have to have at least that one partner that's involved. You can upload additional letters if you would like. They all just have to be part of one, a single PDF, because there's just a single upload button in there. The third area that we'll be looking at is that the integration of DEI practices. And so the narrative question in the application asks you to describe how your project incorporates DEI strategies into the planning, outreach, and execution as it relates to the delivery or stated outcomes of your project. The fourth criteria area asks you to describe your organization's readiness to implement the project by outlining the following. So again, this is kind of a criteria area that's reviewed and scored based on two components of the application. So there's a narrative box where you can outline for us the timeline of activities that are proposed to be happening as part of this project, and then describing how the project outcomes are going to be measured and evaluated. And then in the score for this question, we also take a look at the budget that you'll be providing, and making sure that that budget, looking that it is clear and the amounts of funding that are being asked for seem appropriate to the project scope and goals that you've outlined for us. And then the final question is also a sort of a two-part area. One, and we will go through the application online here in today's webinar, but one area provides the key strategies of the Arts and Culture Master Plan and provides a checkbox area for you to select which strategies this project is seeking to actively advance. And then there's an opportunity of then providing a narrative of how you foresee that project is going to be doing that work and advancing that strategy. We've also offered that if you have, if your organization, if the project that you're putting forward is also aligning with some other different city goals or different city plans, we would like to hear about that as well. You do not have to be aligned with these other pieces of information, with the goals and priorities of the City Council, the Imagine Dubuque Plan, the Climate Action Plan, or the Equitable Poverty Reduction and Prevention Plan. This project does not have to be aligned with those, but if it happens to be, we would like to know about that and offer you the opportunity to talk to us about that in the narrative response to this question. So in terms of that DEI integration that we keep seeing and hearing about throughout this program and all of our funding programs at the city, the reason that we do this is that because we, as the City of Dubuque, we strive to be an equitable community of choice, and we, with sensible and appropriate use of city tax dollars, we want to prioritize support to organizations and programs that intentionally apply an equity lens that is explicit of, but not limited to, race when it comes to the program's access and inclusion. It is important that grantees are able to share examples of their commitment to welcoming and serving any and all Dubuque residents by presenting diverse and culturally aware experiences, representing diverse voices, and expanding access to arts and culture for all. And again, here's one of those areas where there is a link in the slides in the recording that you can click on, and it will take you to some inclusive Dubuque tools and resources if you want to do more learning and have more resources on DEI work. So as we get into actually submitting the application part, like I mentioned earlier, applications must be submitted online, and this year we have transitioned to using SlideRoom as our online application portal. So the direct website address for our SlideRoom space is cityofdubuque.slideroom.com. There is a downloadable PDF of the applications either on our website at cityofdubuque.org/artsgrants, or that's the same document that is in the handout section of today's webinar control panel. And I'll show you as we get into the SlideRoom space where you can also click to preview and print the questions in the application directly from SlideRoom as well. So there's multiple ways to get that in advance to help you prepare your application. It's important to note that throughout the application and any of those narrative response areas that there is a limit of maximum character counts, and that those character counts all include counting the spaces that are in there. And we ask that you attach only the requested documents and to be mindful of the requested document length. And on some of the items, there is a note of asking for just like, I think there's one in terms of uploading a PDF of the leadership of your organization related to the project. We want that to be kept to just a page so that we don't have tons and tons and tons of extra pages of stuff for our volunteer reviewers to go through. One other thing that I will add about the Slide Room portal is that it's Internet Explorer is not the friendliest browser to use Slide Room on. So we suggest using a different internet browser for utilizing Slide Room, something like Chrome or Firefox, or else just something other than Internet Explorer. So also about submitting the application, that you as the applicant and not city staff is solely responsible for the content of your application. We don't allow changes or additions to the application after it's submitted, unless there's something that we notice that we need more information on, or perhaps you uploaded the wrong document for your 501c3 designation, and we might reach out to you to get the correct documentation. The deadlines are strictly enforced, and that's mostly because at that 11:59 p.m. on May 13th, the Slide Room is set to cut off access to the application. And I just offer up to contact me with questions either through email or at my mobile work number. You can get a hold of me. And my typical schedule is Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. In terms of technical support, if you're in the Slide Room portal and having difficulties working with the actual online application space, it's best to reach out to Slide Room directly at support@slideroom.com, and they can help you with the technical aspects of the online application if you have any difficulties. So in terms of getting to the application online and any of the information about the program, there's a couple ways to go about doing it. One is if you start, if you just were to type in cityofdubuque.org and start on the city's main landing page, you would want to go under the Doing Business tab at the top, and then there is an link to the Arts and Culture section of the website. Or you can also just type in directly www.cityofdubuque.org/arts and culture, and that will take you to this same place that link up there will take you to. Once you're on the main landing page for the Arts and Culture section of the city's website, one of the best ways to navigate to the information about our funding programs is to look at the left-hand menu that's on that web page. There's a funding programs tab, which would normally have a little plus sign next to it. When you would click on the plus sign, it gives you this drop down that takes you directly to any of the exact pages where the information for the specific funding program is located at. So in this case, you would click on the special projects link there. And then that would take you to a page that looks like this, to our special projects grant information. And here you can get access to those PDFs of the handouts that are in the handout section of the control panel today. And you can also click here on this button, will take you directly to the Slide Room application. And if you've already done all of that work and you're just ready to start your application, you can simply just start by typing in cityofdubuque.slideroom.com, which will take you to a page like this. to this website, which this is what I'm going to do right now myself. And I'm going to just log out quick so we have the same experience. So you have the same experience from the same starting point when you would go to that website address, to the slideroom.com space. So it will ask you to, if you already have an account created with an entity like the Iowa Arts Council for their slide room space, it's that same username and password that you would use to access them. With slide room, you set up a basic account at the beginning, and then you use that across any entity that is using slide room as their application portal. So if you didn't have an account already, you would click on that sign up button, and this would take you to a space to create your username and create a password. Once you do that, it takes you to another page where you put in the basic information about you as the applicant, and then that gets carried over to any slide room application that you would complete for any entity you'd be applying for. So since I already have a slide room account, I'm gonna go back to where we were and go to the login, and it remembered my email and my password for me. Don't want to save that. And once I log in, then what I'm going to see is any of the live programs that are available to apply for through the City of Dubuque Arts and Cultural Affairs office. So here we're going to click on the special projects link, which will take us to the start of information about that. You can either choose right here to just jump into the application, or again, here's where you could preview the full application, which gives you the things that we're asked, the information that we're asking for about you as the applicant. There is a section that is to complete, which is the organizational profile section. This section is not scored in the application. It is just there to provide us with some basic information regards to eligibility for the applicant. So that's where you choose if you're a 501c3 under the sponsorship of a fiscal agent, or if you're a group that is working in service to the community, but not yet a nonprofit. This is the area where you check that eligibility, upload documentation affirming that. We ask you to just tell us an applicant what is the mission, and to briefly describe some of your primary programs as an organization. And if you are an arts and culture, if your organization's primary mission is not related to arts and culture, we ask you to, in this response to this question, to discuss how arts and culture connects to or advances your overall organization's goals and priorities, so we can get a sense of who you are as an applicant organization. And I think I mentioned this earlier about we do ask you to upload a one-page PDF of the key leadership, staff or volunteers, board of director, etc., that will be involved in the development and the implementation of that project. So again, that organizational profile section is not scored. And then you have the project narrative area. There is a separate form for the arts and culture master plan piece, because that's simply the easiest way to lay it out, and I'll show you that in a second. And then there's a place to provide the budget for the project that you're proposing. And then at the end of the application, there are assurances to read and affirm before you hit submit. So let me go back up here to just go into starting an application. So if you have worked, so if you're also completing an operating support grant for this year, you This form here, the applicant contact information form, is actually the same for both of those programs. So, so you may have an indicator up here at the top that allows you to copy your answers from that form in a different program. So you can do that. And actually, I'll just do that quick to mine because I did a test operating support one with not real information, obviously, just filling in these things. One nice thing that I appreciate about the slide room space is that you can go on to, well, one, it automatically saves for you as you go through the application. And then as you go on to the next form, if you decide that you don't actually want to fill out all of the organizational profile piece at this time, you can move ahead in the application, and it will save just some parts and pieces. So I'm going to hit save just to show you one thing that it does when you put in a piece of the information and move on forward onto the next step. It does give you some little warnings here of things that are not complete. Gives you a little warning next to the form up here so that you know there's something missing, but it lets you continue on to the next piece of the application. For those of you that have applied for these programs through our online form center before, you'll also find that you can, I'm going to go back to this the organizational profile one, that you can upload files now in the process, and it will save them and keep them connected to the slide room application. And the old form center, you had to wait and upload all of the, sorry about that, you had to wait and upload all of your documents at the end right before hitting submit. So again, that application organizational profile section, I'm going to move on to the project narrative part where we ask for a title, when your project's going to start, when your project is anticipated to end. We ask you to briefly just give a real brief 3 to 5 sentence synopsis of the project so we have an idea of what you're going to be doing before we start getting into the nitty-gritty narratives, responses that these end up following the rubric here. So, so this is one of those where the active partnership, that criteria piece where you see there's an opportunity for providing a narrative to tell us about that active partnership, and then followed by an opportunity to upload that letter of commitment right here. That's pretty, I think that's all pretty straightforward. And again, the questions that are in the question PDF. So I'm going to go on to the next step to just show you what that master plan implementation one looks like. So this is all pulled directly from the Arts and Culture Master Plan document with the 4 main priorities and the main strategies that are under this. This is not one of those situations where the more check boxes checked, the better it is looked at. It is actually, we really want you to select the ones that most directly apply to the project that you're putting forth. And then at the end, you have an opportunity, at the end of this form, you have the opportunity to complete a narrative that tells us how the project is advancing the strategies that you've selected above here. This will also look different to those of you who have applied for special projects in the past. Previously, we've had a separate Excel, or actually I think it was a Word document that you completed with your budget. The budget is now filling that out and providing those numbers is actually part of the slide room space now. So you have rows where you can provide the description of the expense along with the amount that's going to be covered by the grant request, and you can add as many rows as you need to give yourself space to talk about the different expenses related to the project. And this first piece here is just what are those expenses that are actually being covered by the grant funds that you're requesting. The second question is what of your expenses are being covered by your match, and it gives you, there's a few more columns here because you would describe your expense and then you would place in here the value of that expense, and if it's being covered by cash, in kind, what that funding source is, and to let us know if the funding source is secured or is pending. And then just at the end, we just want you to add up those numbers for us of your the expenses to be covered by the grant request, the expenses to be covered by the match, and this number down here should be a total of those two sections. And then once you have that completed, there's just some simple assurances that we ask you to make sure that you've read through regarding that your your application is that you've read and you understand the program guidelines and the funding policies, that what you've provided in the application is true and correct, that we might reach back out to you for further documentation. So just to know that that might happen. That because you are applying to the City of Dubuque for funding, the application and the materials that you provide are public record. They're not made readily available to the public, but if somebody were to ask for put in a request for public information, they could, we would have to make that available to them. We do ask that if you are awarded funding, as you promote your activity and your project, that you incorporate City of Dubuque logo and credits in materials appropriately, and we do provide on the website suggested ways of how to do that, along with links to our logo for download. And then you can let us know if you would like to receive our arts and culture newsletter, which we send out to provide acknowledgement or to provide public notice about public meetings and events that we have coming up and other different opportunities. So that gets you to the end of the form. If we had completed all of these things, so right now it's saying that on each of these pieces of the application, we have stuff that's missing. If we had actually completed everything, I'm going to go back to my slideshow, then you would see a page that looks like this. Well, it'd be a little different from this because this was the one from the operating support when I got to the end and had everything filled out, where the forms will have a green check mark on the top. You'll just have submit here, and it'll provide, and you'll see this blue submit application button as opposed to that list of incomplete forms with the little red triangles next to them. So you would hit the submit application button, and then you should see a screen similar to this that lets you know that it's been successfully submitted, and you can print out that confirmation and also print out a copy of your application for your records if you would like. In terms of the review process, these are once you submit your application, then this is the process that we go through our end, that we receive the applications and then we just review them to make sure that everything is there and all the projects put forth are actually eligible for to be considered for funding. We'll be the ones reaching out to you with updates throughout the process and letting you know that things are moving forward. Those applications are then made accessible to a review panel who scores your applications, and then those scores are compiled by myself and forwarded to the commission so that they can draft a funding recommendation, like we talked about earlier, which goes on to the city manager and to city council, who then reviews and approves that funding recommendation. And then once I have that thumbs up from those parties, then we start the work of creating the contracts, notifying applicants of if their request was funded and at what level it was funded at, and then we take care of doing public announcements and press releases, media stuff to let the public know about your great project that you have coming up and the funding that's been awarded to you. And just a couple of helpful tips, which these might seem probably things you already know, but just little reminders, I guess, to say and remind you to review and prepare your materials early. I do know within that slide room space, for instance, that if you, it can take, a 24-hour period for them to get back to you if you were to, especially when it comes to if they needed to help you reset your password. I recently ran into that with an Art on the River artist who they could not, they were having trouble resetting their password, and they couldn't do it in time to submit an application because they had waited till the very end to get started. There is that PDF of the questions that are available. I would highly suggest using that. If you have Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat, you can easily turn that PDF and convert it into a Word document that you could type directly into, which would allow you to check your character counts, and then you can copy and paste from that Word document right into the online form. Just be aware of, keep it front of mind that as you're writing those narrative responses, that the character counts do include spaces. Keep the community and the outcomes and impact that you want to see in regards to the community front and center when you're describing the project that you want to be doing. And then, of course, as always, just to feel free to reach out to me if you have questions along the way in the process. So with that in mind, my contact information, my email, the first phone number is my office phone number. That is supposed to be an OR, not a PR. So the first number is my office phone. The second is my mobile number. Pretty easy to get a hold of Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. If for some reason you couldn't get a hold of me, my intern, Mike Williams, can be reached via email. He doesn't necessarily do a lot of work with the grant programs themselves, but he can definitely help to track me down if you were having trouble getting in touch with me. And then the slide room support email if you're having technical difficulties with the actual slide room space online. So with that, I will open it up for questions, and we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to pop in here because I did see a question I think came up. Okay, so a question from, this is a great question. Can the partner be from outside of Dubuque? Yes, the partner can be from outside of Dubuque, but the primary activities being funded would have to be happening in Dubuque. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions popping up in the either the question area of the control panel or the chat. If you do, as you start going through the application, if you do have a question that pops up, as always, just feel free to reach out to me, and I can answer that question, either get a hold of me via email or via phone. Either way works. So I think with that, I will we'll close out the webinar, and this will be posted online. It'll be available at the special projects funding information page. What I do is I replace the in the timeline on that page, I replace the registration link with a link that takes you to this webinar out on YouTube for viewing. I'll also, as I think about it and as I was talking today, I realized in order for you to actually access the links that are hot linked to in this webinar, I have to turn it into a PDF. So I'll also make that PDF available on the website for download to look at. So, okay. Well, I thank you all for joining me today and for being here. I wish you a great rest of your Friday and a really nice and hopefully warmer weekend. So take care of everybody, and good luck with your applications. Thanks.